Hi, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you here. And you are a winner at the book prizes last night, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
And so we want you to talk a lot about your book,
Okay.
Breasts.
I wrote this book, Breasts. It came out last year, 2012. And what inspired me to write it was I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I saw some research that toxic chemicals were showing up in breast milk. And I wanted to tell this story, and it occurred to me that an interesting way to do it would be to actually test my own breast milk. So I got a magazine assignment from the New York Times Magazine, and we FedExed a vial of my breast milk to a lab in Germany, which was one of the few places in the world that had the technology to measure these really minute amounts of compounds in breast milk. So it turns out that I have flame retardants in my breast milk, and pesticides, and also a jet fuel ingredient. Those were the main ones that we looked for. And
just back up for one quick second. So why did it occur to you that that actually might be the case, that you might have something in your body, in your breast milk, that you wouldn't want to have?
Well, what I learned is that we actually all have industrial compounds coursing through our bloodstreams all the time, whether you're a man or a woman or a child. But some of these compounds are attracted to fat, and so they accumulate in fatty mammalian tissue, of which breasts count. And then, of course, breast milk itself is a very fatty substance. And so it collects some of these compounds. And I wanted to know what this meant for our health and what it meant for my baby's health. I wanted to know whether it was safe to continue breastfeeding. And I found out actually it is, because the benefits of breast milk still really outweigh the risks. And of course, formula is not pristine either.
No, not at all.
And it just made me wonder how else modern life has affected breasts and breast health. And it turns out what I learned from writing this book is that breasts have really changed in modern life.
Well, details, please.
Okay. So what I learned is that breasts are getting bigger, and this is largely because naturally and artificially. This is largely because of our Western diets. Our bodies are bigger everywhere, and of course we all know we gain weight sometimes in our breasts. So this is documented by mostly the lingerie industry, which keeps tabs of these things.
Wow,
So
really?
So the average American cup size has actually changed from a B cup about 15 years ago to a C plus cup today. I also learned that breasts are arriving earlier in young girls, and this is something many of us, I think, have noticed sort of anecdotally. But now the research supports it.
And that is sometimes also associated with chemicals, right?
Well, so researchers are trying very hard to find out why this is happening, and it's something that we should all be concerned about, because we know that early puberty is associated with breast cancer risk later on. And young girls who develop early face kind of unique social problems and pressures. So it's something we're all concerned about. And one of the theories is again, diet may be causing some of this early puberty, but it doesn't seem to account for the whole thing. And so another leading theory is, again, industrial compounds, some of which we know mimic estrogen. And we also know that the breast tissue is filled with estrogen receptors. And in fact, it's estrogen that tells the breast to grow. And that also could be behind why breasts are bigger, part of it. We also know that breasts, of course, are living a new life with silicone implants, and that's been since the 1960s. This is actually the 50th anniversary of the silicone implant.
And welcome to the land of the implant.
And welcome to the land of the implants, right? Fun to be in LA, and Texas too. I spent some time in Texas.
Oh yeah.
I actually, I interviewed the first woman to ever receive silicone implants, and she's still alive in Houston, Texas.
How old is she?
She's in her 80s.
How does she look?
She looks great. It's funny, she actually still has the original implants, which is very unusual because we all know breast implants have a shelf life. Natural breasts have a shelf life too, but silicone implants have a particularly short shelf life. But she has never wanted to remove her implants, even though she knows that they've hardened and they've ruptured. But it's a big deal operation to get them out. So she still has them. And then, of course, it's hard to write a book about breasts without talking about breast cancer.
Can you point to one or two things that you learned in researching this book that you found completely shocking?
Well, I did find shocking that early puberty is occurring. I found shocking that we have so many chemicals coursing through our bodies that have never been tested for health or safety. It was shocking to me. I think we assume that when we buy a shampoo or a toothpaste, that the substances in there have been tested.
Yes, everyone thinks that.
Right, and it turns out they haven't, actually. We do have some toxicity, laws in this country, but so many chemicals have been grandfathered through. 62,000 chemicals were grandfathered into the law when it was passed in the 70s. And with new chemicals today, regulators just cannot keep up with chemicals. Companies are not required to test chemicals before they go into products. So this is something that a lot of consumer and health groups are very concerned about and are working hard to try to reform some of that regulation.
You've been on tour with this book.
Yeah.
What's the oddest thing that's happened to you, or how much creepiness has crept into a book tour?
People have been very receptive to the book. And I find that people like to talk about breasts. I have men come to my readings and women.
I'm sure you do.
And it's really interesting. The men love to talk about the evolution of the breast. And I talk about that in my book, sort of why we have breasts, because our breasts are actually very unique in the animal kingdom, because we have them our entire adult lives.
Right, you were talking about that last night, yes.
And other primates really only have sort of swellings on their chest while they are lactating. So men really want to know about that, and they want to know, if breasts really evolved to be a sexual signal or not, because it's a big debate in anthropology. Whereas the women really want to talk about health. They want to talk about breast cancer. So, there's something for everybody.
In terms of breast cancer, again, when you were researching the book, what were some of your most important self-discoveries as you were researching?
Well, one thing that's so unique about breasts is that they are our last organs to grow up, to develop on our bodies. And they actually don't finish developing until the last trimester of pregnancy. So for many women, that is well into our adulthoods. For those of us who have children later in life, our breast cells are not fully differentiated for a long time. And it looks like because of that, there's an extended window of vulnerability for carcinogens to act upon those breast cells. So that was a really interesting revelation for me, and it helps explain why the breast is the most common organ on the body for cancer, other than the skin.
Wow, that's quite something. I can only imagine that you had this crush of research, anecdotes, difficult to write?
It was actually a joy to write. I spent a lot of time with very brilliant, fascinating researchers, from anthropologists to medical scientists to people who study lactation. And I was worried as a journalist that I might get bored over the course of writing a whole book, because this is my first book, and I thought I have an attention span for articles, like a lot of journalists.
Yes.
But all of the chapters are so different that it really sustained my interest. And I'm still interested in breasts. I could just talk about them all day long.
Are you thinking about what's next?
Not so much, but I would like to continue writing about the intersection of the environment and human health. I think it's a really emerging, interesting, dynamic field. It's in some ways it's sort of where climate science was 15 years ago. There's a sort of increasing preponderance of evidence, and the research is fascinating.
Well, you're in Los Angeles. You've said you spent a little time in Los Angeles. So one of the things we've been talking to our guests about is books about Los Angeles. And if you have any favorites and what they might be.
Well, I certainly was influenced by Nathaniel West. And loved that. Yes. And then, more contemporary fiction as well. Let's see. Now I might be drawing a blank. I just had lunch with Christine Sneed, who has a new novel out about Los Angeles. And she said it's really hard to write about Los Angeles because everyone thinks they know what Los Angeles is like.
I think everyone does think they know.
Right, and so if you write something that not everyone agrees with, it can be, a sort of controversial experience.
But people keep coming back to this geographic area as a topic.
Yeah, they do.
What's the allure?
I think, part of it is this wonderful merging of East and West and so many layers of culture and ethnicity. I think of Carolyn C. I love her work.
Yes, she's terrific.
I think of Sandra Singh Low, and her sort of unique voice as the child of immigrants, I think is where kind of the American dream maybe clashes with the old world dream, and that really happens in Los Angeles.
Right.
So I think it's a very rich literary environment.
Literary landmarks here, anything come to mind?
Well, let's see. I love the richness of modern art here, and I wonder about the influence of that on literature. There's so much fantastic modern architecture here.
Yes.
And so much great sort of things like rocket science and the futurism of art, and I think that must have played out in literature here as well.
Anything else about Los Angeles that you find interesting, compelling? Could you ever see yourself writing about Los Angeles?
Well, I live on the East Coast, and I'm always happy to visit Los Angeles, but I don't know if I could work it out to actually spend a lot of time here because of my family commitments there. But yes, I think Los Angeles is a very rich place to write about. California in general. Actually, my grandmother grew up in San Francisco. And so I do feel some affinity to California, and I certainly love coming here.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending time and talking about breasts.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right.